At 4:41 a.m., it happens. No warning, no speech, no buildup. The world's most important oil route just got blocked. Within minutes, satellites pick up unusual movement. Fast attack boats, dozens of them, spreading across a narrow stretch of water barely 21 miles wide. Then the first signal hits. A distress call from a commercial tanker. "We are under threat. Repeat, under threat." And just like that, the Strait of Hormuz is no longer a shipping lane. It's a kill zone. To understand what just happened, you need to understand what Hormuz really is. This isn't just a strait. It's the single most important choke point in the global economy. Every single day, nearly 20% of the world's oil supply passes through this narrow corridor between Iran and Oman. Thousands of ships, billions of dollars, entire economies dependent on this one route staying open, and now it's closed. Not officially, not declared, but effectively. No ship is willing to move. Because in these waters, hesitation means survival. It starts with confusion. Radar systems begin lighting up across multiple vessels. Unknown contacts, fast-moving, low signature, then visual confirmation. Small boats, heavily armed, moving in coordinated patterns. Not random, not chaotic. This is planned. Iran's fast attack craft, built for one purpose: swarm warfare. They don't need to sink every ship. They just need to create enough fear that no one dares to enter. And then comes the second layer. Sea mines. Invisible. Silent. Deadly. Dropped overnight, or planted weeks ago. Now activated. And suddenly, even the most advanced navy in the world has a problem. Within the first hour, global shipping traffic stops. Tankers drift. Some try to turn back. Others freeze in place. Insurance companies issue emergency notices. Transit through Hormuz is no longer considered safe. And then, oil prices spike instantly. Markets react before governments do. Because traders understand something politicians don't. This isn't just a regional conflict. This is a global shockwave, hundreds of miles away. A U.S. Navy carrier strike group is already moving. The aircraft carrier, escorted by destroyers and cruisers, begins repositioning toward the Gulf. Fighter jets are prepped, surveillance drones launched, missile systems activated. On paper, this is overwhelming power. The most advanced naval force on Earth. But here's the problem. They don't fire. Not immediately. Because the moment the first missile launches, this situation changes forever. What most people don't realize is this. Closing the Strait of Hormuz doesn't require total control. It just requires controlled chaos. Iran doesn't need to defeat the U.S. Navy. They just need to make the strait too dangerous to cross. And they've spent years preparing for exactly this scenario. Missile batteries hidden along the coastline. Mobile launch platforms that can relocate within minutes. Underground facilities designed to survive airstrikes. So even if the U.S. responds, they're not hitting a single target. They're entering a network, a layered defense system built for one thing: delay. So why not just clear the strait? Why not send in ships, remove the mines, and reopen the route? Because mine warfare is one of the slowest, most dangerous operations in naval combat. Each mine has to be detected, identified, neutralized, one by one. And all of this, while under constant threat from missiles, drones, and swarm attacks. It's not just difficult, it's a nightmare. So now you have a standoff. Iran doesn't need to advance, the U.S. doesn't want to escalate, and the world is stuck waiting. Oil tankers backed up, shipping routes frozen, global supply chains beginning to crack, and every hour that passes, the pressure builds. Within hours of the blockade, the effects begin to spread far beyond the Middle East. Oil prices don't just rise, they surge. Violently. Markets open in Asia and immediately drop. European futures follow, then U.S. markets react, billions, wiped out in minutes. Because this isn't just about supply, it's about uncertainty, and uncertainty is what crashes economies. Shipping companies issue emergency reroutes. Tankers that were heading toward Hormuz now divert thousands of miles around Africa, a journey that adds weeks and billions in cost. Airlines begin calculating fuel shortages, governments start preparing strategic reserves, and suddenly, this isn't a military problem anymore. It's a global crisis. Back in the Gulf, the U.S. Navy faces a decision: wait and let the pressure build, or act and risk escalation. Because the moment the U.S. launches a strike, everything changes. Iran responds, allies get involved, and what started as a blockade becomes a war. So instead, the U.S. does something unexpected. They hold. Instead of rushing in, they begin shaping the battlefield. Surveillance increases. Cyber operations begin. Electronic warfare systems activate, because modern naval warfare isn't just about missiles. It's about information. Disrupt the enemy's communication, blind their targeting systems, delay their coordination, and slowly shift control without firing the first shot. What follows isn't visible on the surface. No explosions, no dramatic strikes. But beneath it all, a silent war is unfolding. Signals jammed, drones intercepted, missile systems disrupted before they can launch, and bit by bit, the pressure begins to shift. But here's what most people don't realize. Even if the U.S. regains control, even if the mines are cleared, even if the ships start moving again, the damage is already done. Because global markets don't reset overnight. Supply chains don't instantly recover. And once fear enters the system, it lingers. Oil prices stabilize, but at a higher level. Shipping resumes, but slower. Insurance premiums skyrocket. And every country that depends on this route starts asking the same question: what if it happens again? Because now, the vulnerability is exposed, and this is where everything changes. Nations begin rethinking energy routes. New alliances form. Military presence in the region increases, not temporarily, but permanently. Because the Strait of Hormuz is no longer just a choke point, it's a pressure point, one that can be triggered at any time. And that's the real story here. Iran doesn't need to win a war. They don't need to defeat the U.S. Navy. All they need to do is prove that they can disrupt the system, even briefly, because in today's world, a few hours of disruption can create weeks of consequences. So the question isn't, can the U.S. reopen the Strait of Hormuz? Because eventually, they can. The real question is, at what cost? And how many times? Can the world afford for it to happen again? Because the next time it closes, it might not just be a warning. Got it. Here's a continuation extension, Part 2B, to push your video longer, deeper, and even more addictive. You can directly paste this into 11 labs as well. And just when it seems like the situation is stabilizing, something unexpected happens, a single incident, small on the surface, but massive in consequence. A commercial tanker, attempting to cross under naval escort, suddenly stops transmitting. No explosion, no distress call, just silence. Within minutes, nearby ships begin pulling away. Because in a zone like this, silence is never random. It means something is wrong, and that uncertainty spreads faster than any missile ever could. Naval commanders now face a new problem, not just clearing the strait, but maintaining confidence. Because even if the path is technically open, if no one is willing to sail through it, then it might as well still be closed, and that's the real power of a blockade like this. It doesn't rely on constant force. It relies on doubt, on hesitation, on the idea that something could happen at any moment, and that changes everything. Convoys begin forming. Warships escorting tankers through narrow corridors, every movement calculated, every mile monitored. But even then, progress is slow, because one mistake, one missed threat, could reset everything back to zero. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, diplomatic pressure begins to rise. Back-channel communications open. Warnings are sent. Lines are drawn. Because no major power wants this to spiral out of control, but at the same time, No one wants to appear weak, and that balance is fragile. Extremely fragile. Because all it takes is one miscalculation, one missile fired too early, one defensive system reacting too late, and suddenly, this controlled crisis becomes something much bigger, something uncontrollable, and that's the edge everyone is standing on. Not full-scale war, but not peace either. A gray zone, where every decision carries weight, and every second matters. Days pass, then weeks. The strait begins to function again. Partially. Ships move. Slowly, under heavy protection. But the world has already adapted. Alternate routes are being used. Energy. Strategies are shifting, and the idea of relying on a single choke point is no longer acceptable, because now everyone has seen what can happen, not in theory, but in reality. And once that realization sets in, there's no going back. The Strait of Hormuz is still there, still critical, still vital, but it's no longer trusted the same way, and that changes the future of global trade permanently, because the next time tensions rise, the question won't be if it can close again. It will be when, and more importantly, how prepared the world will be when it does. Because this wasn't just a blockade, it was a warning. Demonstration of how fragile the system really is, and how quickly everything can shift, from stability to uncertainty, from movement to complete, and in a world that depends on constant flow. Even a brief can change everything. And even after the ships begin moving again, the tension never really disappears. Because now, every radar signal feels more important. Every unidentified contact becomes a potential threat. Command centers stay on high alert, long after the crisis is declared under control. And that's the hidden cost of events like this. Not just the economic damage, not just the disruption, but the permanent shift in mindset. Navies don't relax, shipping companies don't forget, governments don't take chances, because once a vulnerability is exposed, it becomes part of every future calculation. New defense systems are deployed, more surveillance, more patrols. The region becomes more crowded, more monitored, more tense, and ironically, that increased presence brings its own risks, because the more forces you have operating in a confined space, the higher the chance of miscalculation, a radar lock that wasn't meant to escalate, a warning shot that gets misunderstood, a maneuver that's seen as a threat instead of caution, and suddenly, you're back on the edge again. That's the reality of modern choke points. They don't just control trade, they control tension, and the Strait of Hormuz sits at the center of it all. A narrow stretch of water, carrying not just oil, but pressure. Global pressure, and even when it's open, even when ships are moving, that pressure never fully goes away, it just waits. Building quietly, until the next moment of friction, the next decision, the next signal. Because in a place like this, peace isn't permanent. It's temporary, maintained, not guaranteed, and every ship that passes through does so under an unspoken understanding that everything is fine, until it suddenly isn't. And when that moment comes again, it won't feel new. It won't feel unexpected. It will feel familiar. Faster. More intense. Because the world has already seen how quickly this can happen, how quickly stability can collapse, and how difficult it is to fully restore it. So the strait remains open. For now. But the question lingers. Not just in military briefings, not just in government strategy rooms, but in global markets, in energy policies, in every system connected to this single passage. How long will it stay that way? And when the next disruption comes, will the world be ready, or will it once again be caught in the same moment? Watching everything slow down as one narrow waterway brings the entire system to a halt.